Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. With episode 714 of your favorite professional wrestling podcast. That's right, Getting Over is back once again, and it is Thursday, so you know exactly what that means. We are here to break down everything that happened over the last week across NXT and AEW. NXT coming out of that incredible Roadblock television special. AEW quickly building to its Dynasty pay-per-view. That means a ton transpired over 4 hours of television for AEW and 2 hours for NXT this week. And of course, we're here to break it all down for you as comprehensively as we can. With that said, as we get into today's program, allow the Silver King to remind you that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about Defy.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify, leave a 5-star rating on Apple, take a little extra time, leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. We told you our goal is 500 reviews on Apple Podcasts. By the time WrestleMania 41 begins, we're at 494. So damn close. Again, we know how many of you listen. We know how many of you have left reviews. There's a wide gulf, I promise you, between those two numbers. So get off your lazy bums. Leave a 5-star written review on Apple. We would greatly appreciate it. Do not forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. You get full audio episodes, of course. You also get clips from our old interviews, video interviews, that is, and full-length video interviews of everything we do in 2025 and beyond. We may wind up putting video of the show on YouTube. Just depends how the channel works out, but it is off and running. We've cleared every YouTube hurdle. We're monetized. Everything's great, but we need y'all to watch and subscribe at Getting Overcast on YouTube. Don't forget to follow us on social media as well, at Getting Overcast on Twitter, at Getting Over on Blue Sky. Episode drops, news analysis highlights, all of that good stuff. You can also send in questions and comments for the show. We will do our best to read them on this program. Now, we have a loaded show for you as usual, a ton to discuss when it comes to NXT, AEW, a very brief conversation about WWE Evolve as well. I actually need to open up this episode with something that rarely happens here on the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. The Silver King needs to make a mea culpa because I made a mistake on our Tuesday WWE show that I need to correct. I criticized Michael Cole for crediting Pat McAfee with inventing the term Frankensteiner. Well, apparently what Cole actually said during Raw on Monday night, and what many of you were happy to point out to the Silver King, you caught me in a mistake. Again, very rare that I actually make one, but you all caught me. I did get it wrong. Michael Cole credited Pat McAfee with inventing the term Breakensteiner. So obviously changing Frankensteiner for Braun Breaker's last name. I got it wrong. You all were right. Apologies to Michael Cole for the criticism. We praise Cole and most of the play-by-play men for WWE, play-by-play and color commentators for WWE on this show. But of course, they all make mistakes sometimes. And you know who else sometimes makes mistakes? Your boy, the Silver King. So my bad on that criticism. The lone news item for this week is that WWE is going to be holding an ID Championship tournament on Wednesday in Las Vegas ahead of WrestleMania week. The reason why this is newsworthy is not just that they're doing this because we knew they were going to crown champions, but GCW is going to be serving as the host of this event, which is simply not something I ever would have predicted. WWE, they've been allowing talent to do Bloodsport, which is also under the GCW banner. Natalya and Pete Dunne will be participating this WrestleMania weekend, but that's Josh Barnett's show. So it is interesting to see this now happen. And it has me wondering whether GCW might actually fall into that old ECW role where it's an outlaw indie promotion on one hand, yet partially financed, supported, and recognized by the behemoth of WWE on the other hand. The difference, of course, is that ECW had national television and a following way beyond what GCW has, but 2025 is immensely different from 1998. So we're going to have to wait and see how all this transpires. But at first blush, it's an immense surprise, and I just never would have expected GCW, I mean, I'm sure for GCW it's financially, positive, but I wouldn't have expected WWE to get in bed with GCW to this degree for the inaugural tournament for the WWE ID Championships on WrestleMania weekend. I mean, GCW being an indie promotion that has a lot of connections when it comes to venues and equipment and setting stuff up for smaller events like this makes a lot of sense for them to partner together. I just never really thought it would happen. So pretty interesting move from both parties there. With that said, let's move to our breakdowns of NXT and AEW. We will kick off with NXT as we usually do. There will be timestamps in the episode description if you want to jump around for one reason or another. As always, we hope you listen to the entire show. And if by the time we wrap up this program, if ratings for NXT and AEW are both out, we will quickly go over those at the end of the show. But if not, then we'll just close up shop and move on to our WWE episode this coming Tuesday. So starting with NXT on Tuesday night, not a single match on this show was above, let's say, a B, a stark contrast from NXT Roadblock last week. And yet, despite the match quality being low, it was still an immensely entertaining program. Stephanie Vaquer came out with both championships saying English may not be her first language, but wrestling is her first language. She explained that she could have chosen any company or any brand in WWE to make history, but she wanted to do it in NXT and continue the best women's division on the planet. Vaquer said that she's proven she's the best of the best, la primera, la mejor de los mejores, best of the best, and she was wondering who would step up to her. Out came Jordynne Grace wearing the tallest platform shoes I have ever seen someone wear publicly, let alone around a wrestling ring. She's talking about beating Roxanne Perez. So Jada Parker straight up catches her with a blindside pounce and then hypnotic into the barricade. Miss Parker said, "It doesn't work like that." The line starts behind her. Then she amazingly quoted Smokey, Chris Tucker.
"And you know this, man?"
Jada put over Stephanie, telling her to maximize her opportunities right now because it ain't lasting. She met her 10 toes down, face to face, eye to eye, saying to quit playing with her. Excellent segment. Vaquer speaks better English after a few months of classes than I do Spanish, having taken it for like 6 years in school. It was legitimately impressive how clear she came across. Either that or she memorized like I did my Torah portion back in the day. But again, she knocked it out of the park. Promo was on point. Jordan, maybe someone who's into fashion can explain that shoe choice to me. It seemed immensely stupid, both in kayfabe for a wrestler and reality for a human being walking around. Jada was the star of this segment.
"And you know this, man?"
The confidence and swagger was at 100. I cannot remember a wrestler so young into the business as her, completely understanding their character to this level. That is so tough to do. She's immensely special. The promo was just as on point as Stephanie, probably more so. My initial thought was we'll either get a number one contendership between Parker and Grace, or perhaps a triple threat combining what might have been planned opponents for the two titles into a single match at Stand and Deliver. The presumption being that would happen on WrestleMania weekend, and maybe we'd get the two fall concept as a listener suggested last week or the week before. I was just glad Vaquer didn't relinquish the North American title off the jump. That was important, and we discussed why that was important last week. And then a few segments later on NXT, backstage, Ava told Stephanie that she was granting Jada an NXT title match next week. This despite Parker losing a number one contendership for the North American title just last month. Though to be fair, she did beat Kalani Jordan 2 weeks ago between those two situations. Fallon Henley interrupted, demanding her rematch. Ava argued without reason. Vaquer accepted the challenge, then decided to defend both titles one after another next week. Parker later walked out of Ava's office excited, cutting a promo saying she's done playing, and Grace, the new girl, messed around and found out. She won't let anyone get in the way of her being champion. Immense promo from Jada, 2 for 2 on the night. There is just no stopping this woman. I'm legitimately not sure I've ever been a bigger fan of a developmental talent from the very beginning. She might be a better promo than every woman on the main roster other than Becky Lynch. Now, there's obviously two outcomes to this booking for next week. The first being Vaquer successfully defends both titles. The second option is retaining over Parker, but in Stephanie's diminished capacity, and likely due to group interference, she loses the North American title back to Henley. And I'm not sure either is that ideal, unless Fallon is given an excused loss due to botched interference or something like that. Because otherwise, she'd be losing clean to a woman who already fought that same night. That would diminish her. And Henley is someone who has long been ready for the main roster and certainly should not be diminished unless it is her moving up. If it's her last match in the territory, that's another thing. But even when making an alignment adjustment due to injury, you don't want Stephanie, a woman you're putting over as the first double champion in NXT history, to be losing 2 weeks after capturing the second strap. Maybe her barely defending both and escaping with victory is going to be enough of a logical reason for her to then relinquish the title, for Shawn Michaels to demand that she relinquish the title, because we discussed that option last week after Roadblock. It's also possible Grace gets involved in the Parker match, and that still winds up being a triple threat at Stand and Deliver. There's lots of options here. It's another example of the women's division being far more interesting than really anything the men are doing right now, because you have all, I guess, 4 of these women, if you include Fallon. All of them are believable as champion. You could see NXT booking whatever outcome, really with the exception of Vaquer losing straight up to Parker, because that just wouldn't make sense. But you can see pretty much any other combination of results here. And sure, there are some that appear less ideal on the surface than others, but what NXT has largely shown us is they're going to treat the women's division and the titles with respect. They're not going to do something stupid that gets you angry. And that is pretty damn important. So Javon Evans backstage found Trick Williams. He was angry about getting jumped last week and what that faction has been doing in NXT, saying it was their NXT to protect, basically. Trick again dissed him, saying he didn't give a shit about Javon's problems because there's no we. He's focused on himself, winning back the NXT championship. Great line from him. Just because we both got dreads, we supposed to be friends or something? Their dreads were looking mighty identical, to be fair. But pretty cool that Williams called out what would be a typical trope in wrestling, because yeah, guys who look similar as they did in this segment, historically, they would at least be friends backstage. Anyway, Trick said Javon ain't him, never will be champion. He left. Lexis King came in, kind of twisting the knife, saying Evans isn't even good enough to be Heritage Cup champion. I continue to love Trick adding this edge to his character, but this was far more heel than tweener or edgy babyface. And maybe he's turning, which would be great for him long-term, especially if he's going to work that out in NXT, just like Braun Breaker did. As I've maintained, he needs the better part of another year in NXT, particularly for his ring work. Whether that happens, I'm not necessarily sure. It remains my hope, and it gave me reason to believe even more by the time NXT was over. But this, just with Javon and Trick backstage, was a great segment between these two guys. Everyone except Ridge Holland left the men's locker room backstage when Eddie Thorpe entered. They realized they were on the same page with their hate and the disrespect that they've been feeling recently. Thorpe called Williams a sports entertainer, equating him to Ricky Saints for Ridge Holland, and they agreed to deal with their foes that night. This is why the Trick alignment is confusing, because he can't be a heel in one breath only to be compared to Saints as a sports entertainer in another. I get that's how you could define a tweener, but that's not really the role that he's playing right now. So we'll see. Most notable was WWE using the term sports entertainer in a derogatory way on its own program, which I thought was pretty damn interesting. So he had Saints against Holland. Ricky's entrance, it does work better in the WWE Performance Center. The issue is simply the song lacks soul. It sounds like there's no backing beat and the horns are just hollow. I'm not a musician, but even I can tell it's lacking and could be way better just with some adjustments. I'm not saying they have to change it. They just have to improve it. Booker T actually called him Starks during the match, which, fair enough, it's tough to remember. This was mostly a classic WWF style match. Saints hit a tornado, DDT, and Rochambeau for the win. Vic Joseph didn't call the finisher live, which was a miss on commentary for a brand new guy that you're trying to establish, but he did refer to it shortly after the fall. I seriously question the idea of having Saints wrestle his first notable singles match against Holland. Ricky had to carry him the entire match, when really he should be given an opportunity to show off his best stuff right out of the gate. He should be working with like Axiom or Nathan Frazier or Wes Lee or something like that, one-on-one I'm talking about, where you can really see what this guy can do. Instead, you have him dragging Ridge through a match that's WWF style, like 80s or 90s WWF style, which is not the type of match that Ricky should be wrestling. This was disappointing, but again, it just really wasn't his fault. We had D'Angelo family against the Culling. Stacks pumped the others up backstage, and Tony D'Angelo accepted his suggestion of staying back there so Sean Spears did not take him out again in a fit of rage after they win. Adriano Rizzo stood tall after a long tope sequence. The heels hit an interesting flying bulldog out of a gory setup, plus Brooks Jensen delivered a scissor kick. Rizzo jumped off Stax' back for a Thez press on Izzy Dame before Luca Crucifino went on a fiery hot tag, including a slingshot shoulder tackle. The family hit Shatter Machine only for D'Angelo watching backstage on the Titantron to get attacked mid-match by that unnamed faction. Nico Vance caught Luca blind with an inverted attitude adjustment for the win. It's a version of a burning hammer, but not exactly a burning hammer. Rizzo also did a slingshot Molly go round in this match, which was excellent. I didn't want to forget that spot. We later saw backstage footage of D'Angelo taking the 4-man toss powerbomb into a table and the guys yelling that no one is safe. So another attack, sure, but this time still absolutely zero information on these guys, their motivations, even their freaking name. And I was ready to criticize this further, but all that did finally come later in the show. The match was super fun. NXT always does mixed 6-person tags well. Certainly the right winners, given Culling is just being established. And really, this was the best match on the entire show. It shouldn't have been, but it was. Saints backstage said he would deliver on every promise, including bringing a new Revolution to NXT. The Culling confronted him, saying the Revolution is happening already, but despite all of his charisma and star power, he just doesn't measure up. Saints retorted, I always measure up in the right places.
PG, brother.
Then he stared down Sean Spears. I was already booking the damn territory for Saints over Spears at Stand and Deliver. This seemed to confirm, like, that's going to be the booking. And that's definitely the right move. You strap Saints up quickly. You don't interfere with whatever well-laid plans are across the rest of the men's division. Nice backstage segment. Easily Saints' best line and promo back and forth with someone since joining NXT. The 4 guys were caught in the parking lot, the faction, without their masks, so they actually spoke to the camera for the first time. Dion Jordan was initially the frontman, saying they learned that in NXT you got to earn your spot and waiting around makes them sick because they aren't We Are NXT guys. Cutler James called them game changers and difference makers. Then Osiris Griffin said their goal is to reshape NXT and their image. Lastly, Saquon Sugar said, when Dark State strike, ain't nobody safe and the chaos is going to continue. None of their actual names were said on TV, I don't believe, but that's who they are in order of that segment, just so you know if you saw it and now you're listening to this show. They decided to head back inside and tear up some more shit. So if I was going to do like an aura ranking of these 4 dudes, it would be super easy. Sugars over Jordan because Sugars was more natural, but both of them were way clear of the next 2. I guess Griffin then ahead of James, who just stuck out like a sore thumb in this foursome. And no, not because he's white, but because he had absolutely zero bass in his voice compared to the other 3 guys. They were all gruff. He came across soft. But we got a faction name, Dark State as a single word. It's okay. Probably get used to it. We got some stated directives, and they made a significant impact in a couple different segments on the show, as we will talk about coming up. I probably would have suggested them doing this a week or 2 ago, but better late than never. And perhaps there was a reason that it got pushed out this far. But you will remember last week on the podcast, I said next week they have to give us all of this information about this group or they have lost me. And to be fair to NXT, they gave us all the information about this group at my deadline. Williams fought Thorpe in NXT Underground, standard aesthetic here. Thorpe did Randy Orton's toss outside, destroying the announce table. Trick twice powered out of a triangle, the second time dropping Eddie into the trainee's ringside. After Thorpe dodged a running heel kick, Williams caught him coming back with trick shot and won via TKO after delivering unabated hammer fist to his head. This went 4 minutes, which I really don't understand unless Thorpe is like being released or something. Even then, it doesn't make sense for him not to give Williams a hellacious match. I realize that there is logic and reality behind the booking. In a mixed martial arts bout, a street fight even, all it takes is a sudden knockout to end a match or a fight. And that can happen at any given time. But it was particularly strange to blow off a long-term story and this epic feud between these 2 guys in 4 minutes. Did it make Trick look like a total badass? Yes. So it accomplished that goal, but it buried Thorpe. And this is a guy who was just starting to find his footing and become somewhat legitimate on the brand. and they just wiped them all the way back to zero, as far as I was concerned coming out of this. Trick grabbed a mic immediately after the bell. He called out Oba Femi. Oba tore off his shirt for the face-to-face before the lights went out, and Dark State appeared under their spotlights in the crowd. They went to attack, but Javon first ran in to separate Trick from Oba, presumably so that they could team up, but I don't believe commentary said that, and I don't know that his mannerisms showed us that visually as the audience, but that's what I assumed he was doing out there. They tossed Evans aside like he was Io Sky before all the ringside trainees that were there to like cheer on the underground match. They ran onto the mat to pull Oba and Trick apart. Femi and Williams took them out one by one, only for Javon, like Io, sick of being disrespected, to fly in out of nowhere, catching Femi with a cutter. Williams was straight up shocked. Evans got right in his grill, stared him down, and then Dark State in the crowd appeared pleased with themselves, having created chaos by just starting their entrance and not actually having to do anything. Trick and Javon, they remained 10 toes down, looking at one another. The show ended with Oba still flat on his face. I saw criticism for this, being like, Dark State came out and they didn't do anything and they just stood there. They looked like morons. No, the whole point was just their presence caused chaos, that they have that effect just by their entrance music and by standing there. That was the entire gimmick behind it. So I don't understand how people missed that. But I love Trick and Oba going face to face. Javon getting in there is interesting. Are they going to run a triple threat? I mean, with the way WWE is, I don't want to say overdoing, but they're giving us two significant triple threats at WrestleMania. It feels kind of forced on one hand to put Javon in this match when he really doesn't need to be. But if they're saving an Oba Femi Trick Williams blow off for another show, then throwing Javon here does make sense. And don't get it twisted. The segment was hype as hell. I mean, maybe the idea is they're going to be doing Williams and Evans in a singles match, and they're going to use that to turn Trick heel, because Javon might be the one guy that will get cheered over Trick in the ring, especially if he heals it up. And if Trick continues treating him like shit, he cheats in the match, he attacks him after the bell, that could actually get the job done. But I'll just say, seeing these three guys standing together, and Javon, by the way, actually looking solid, despite the others clearly being bigger than him, it showed that he can totally measure up. He's clearly been gaining mass and putting on weight, which, given his frame and his youth, that was real important to start doing now, early in his career. It also served as a stark reminder that you would never see a visual like you did at the end of NXT on the WWE main roster right now, which is really a shame. But at least these guys are being developed, and that counts for something, I guess. I did have another thought coming out of this segment. So you got these Dark State guys. They've attacked Javon. They attacked Oba after his title retention at Vengeance Day. They haven't gone after Trick. Meanwhile, Williams had taken a turn. He's wearing all black. He's changed his hair. The aesthetic of these two parties matches up. What if, and to somehow quote Office Space twice in two shows, this is a big what if, but what if Trick is actually the leader of Dark State? Disillusioned babyface recruits a downtrodden Jordan. Sugars, who came in with Evans but can't get on TV. Two talented PC guys. Realizes he probably needs help to overcome Oba, now having faced him and knowing that that is a tall mountain to climb. He uses Dark State to wreak havoc throughout the division, take down Femi. It would make a lot of sense as to why they immediately went after Oba as their first strike last month. You could change the title, put it on Trick at Stand and Deliver, have him run as a heel champion leading a faction, and then you have Oba Femi win that title back at SummerSlam weekend or whenever they have another major event, and that then sends Trick off to the main roster. It is really interesting if they decide to go in that direction. We'll see what happens. United States Championship was on the line. Chelsea Green defending against Sol Ruca. This opened NXT with a portion of the audience literally doing the Pledge of Allegiance for Chelsea at the bell. Sol dominated offensively before botching a mini springboard off the bottom rope, but she expertly sold the knee immediately. They redid the spot, and it was immediately clear, like, it's just not a spot worth doing in the future. Green caught her with perhaps the best Rough Rider that she's delivered in WWE. She ate a cartwheel DDT off the ropes with Alba Fire forcing the rope break. Zarya speared Alba, but got murked by Piper Niven before Ruka hit a step-off Hurricanrana from the ring post. Chelsea caught Sol coming back inside with a codebreaker, then prevented Soul Snatcher and hit Unprettier to retain the title. I love the match layout. The crowd energy was on point. The effort from both women was there. Perhaps it's because she hasn't wrestled singles in a while, but Ruka was all over the place. there was a clear differentiation between her skill level and what Green was able to do as the veteran in the ring. And that's despite Soul being one of the better prospects. And Chelsea, she's not necessarily among the top third of workers on the main roster. She's a great character. She's certainly among the top third most popular women. But in terms of in-ring work, I wouldn't say she's among the top third, definitely the top half. But it was great to have her in NXT. I love the prospect of Zaria Piper coming out of this. Solid learning opportunity for Soul. She's still young, immensely new to this, and I bet you she picked up a lot from working with Chelsea here. Josh Briggs and Yoshiki Inamura fought Hank and Tank. The big men, well, now that I'm saying that, I guess all four of them were indeed big men.
4 big men slapping meat equals excitement.
Hank and Tank simultaneously failed on springboard moves outside, which was really odd. Hank pounced Inamura into the announce table, which he careened off into the barricade in a really funny spot. Then he caught Briggs with Boss Man Slam in a chaotic sequence, including a compactor and half a tope suicida on Yoshi. Briggs and Inamura ultimately hit their finishers in tandem for the win. The point of this match was that Hank and Tank went too far to the extreme, listening to the advice of the Hardy Boys, and it ultimately cost them. Really not great wrestling. Briggs and Inamura, they continue to flash. Hank and Tank were down in the dumps backstage over that very topic when Wes Lee's crew, which needs to be named, by the way, as a trio, they entered saying sometimes it's not that deep. They just ain't got it. The other guys made fun of their weight, and that was it. It was a quick way to build a match for next week. I like the idea of Hank and Tank continuing to seek advice. I just don't really like them as a team. It's like a super poor man's Public Enemy, spliced with heavy machinery. I was trying to remember. I was going to call them heavy duty. Spliced with heavy machinery, and yet not as good as either team. And Hank, I love his energy. Tank, there's actually something there with him, so it feels like he's being held down. It's fine to be an NXT team right now, but long term, it's just not something that's going to work. It's not that dissimilar, from Heavy Machinery in that Tank would be the Otis in this scenario, where you can see him actually being something. And Hank, you just really don't. Carmen Petrovic fought JC Jane. Carmen was out here looking like Chun-Li. JC was like a Temu Rhea Ripley. Thought it was like Halloween Havoc for a second. Ashanti the Adonis threw a chair into the ring. Carmen refused to use it. JC ultimately came through with what has been established as her new finisher, the rolling encore, for the win. I'm not normally a fan of moves like that being finishers, but holy shit, Jane landed it perfectly. It's like the difference between Andrade's back elbow and Chris Jericho's Judas effect. If you can execute it to that level, you can use it, and it should be a finisher. JC looked great here. She's been ready for the main roster for at least a year. This was proof that even after she seemed to kind of take a step back a few months ago, it was probably just ring rust. And now that she's getting used regularly again, she's right back at it. So a interesting edition of NXT, all things considered. Again, the in-ring product really wasn't there, but the storytelling was on point, both for the women's division and the men's main event division. Surprise, surprise. Interested to see what's going to come in both of those scenarios. Next week, you have Vaquer wrestling 2 matches in one show. As if you needed any other reason to watch NXT, that one is perfect for you. And I am now intrigued about this Dark State group and what's going to happen with Trick, Oba, and Javon. So again, solid NXT top to bottom. Now, before we get into AEW, a quick look at WWE Evolve from this week, and I'm really curious as to whether I can do this in 60 seconds. There were 6 matches on the show, none of them longer than 6 minutes, including the main event between 2 guys who have been on NXT. Maybe the show's at a stage where it's just trying to put as many names in front of fans as possible to establish the roster, but I'd like to have seen at least one match where I could sink my teeth into it as a viewer. Also of note, the audio for anyone but commentary is terrible, including when wrestlers grab the headsets from commentators. It's really odd. Brynlee Reese won her first match with a TKO. Gallus beat a couple dudes by referee stoppage. One of them is named Jordan Oasis, and I kept thinking his name should be Joe Oasis or Joasis. That girl, Kaylee Armstrong, I believe, she flashed again. Total badass. Reminds me of Jazz, but taller. Kylie Ray threw away the note that Wendy Chu gave her last week. That was weird to not actually explain it, kind of like throw it away. Tyreek Igwe and Tyson DuPont obviously won their debut match. Their new finish is a belly-to-back suplex combined with a heart stopper. I appreciate it for its inventiveness. I just think 2 huge dudes could do better than that. Luca Crucifino beat Javier Bernal in the main event. Nice to see big body Javi back from injury. Luca's finisher is a suplex-style neckbreaker over his knee called Case Closed. Love that. I would strongly consider making him the first Evolve champion. I believe they're doing titles, and if they do, Luca should get a big look as the men's title holder. And look, overall, through 3 weeks, frankly, Evolve is boring. Everyone's profile is either that they were a former athlete or they had a rough upbringing. And it's all done in first-person narrative. Wrestling is about showing, not telling. Evolve right now is just telling. I want vignettes and video packages. I don't just want people talking about themselves. Most, not all, but most of the names are pretty generic. And in general, I just want more out of this. If it's a product they actually want me to watch on a weekly basis, we're only 3 shows in. I'm sure improvements are on the way, and maybe they're just setting the groundwork for what they're going to be doing, but it did leave a lot to be desired. So that's WWE Evolve. Got it done in 2 minutes, not 1, but we'll try to keep it 2 minutes or less, except for rare situations in which something actually happens on that show. I would be remiss if I did not remind you, by the way, that here at Getting Over,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well, because for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You'll get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major show, and exclusive news analysis posts every week. Again, that is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. We would greatly appreciate your financial support as we continue this ad-free show that has been running basically 5 years at this point. So let's go ahead and move over to AEW. 8 of 11 AEW matches this week were storyline relevant. They easily hit the 2/3 threshold that we've been asking to see, 73%. I'm going to count that as 3/4. 3 of the matches were indeed part of a tournament, but that still counts. So good on AEW. Dynamite was far better because of it. Not to mention, the matches were high quality. Not exactly on par with NXT Roadblock last week. That quality was crazy high and pretty impossible to match. But it was one of the best wrestling shows that AEW has put on TV in a long time. And TV wrestling is very different from pay-per-view wrestling. Now, we were rightly critical of Dynamite last week. This week, we're going to be rightly praiseworthy of it because the show was a huge week-over-week rebound. Way more entertaining, way better wrestling, way more energetic. Just a better episode top to bottom, even though it was more in-ring and less storyline. But that's okay because that's AEW's bread and butter. It's what they do best. I can't say the same about Collision being praiseworthy of it, unfortunately. I found it boring as sin. But Wednesday was 2 hours well spent. And my understanding is that AEW has put its best foot forward for these 2 one-hour collisions that are going to air Saturday and Sunday night after the NCAA tournament. I heard that the tapings went great. I actually don't even know the results. I just heard people that were there had a great time. So perhaps they, pick up a little momentum coming out of the NCAA tournament. So let's start with Collision. Swerve Strickland opened hour 2, putting over Ricochet's toughness before talking about his number 1 contendership, becoming champion again. Then he put over Adam Copeland for helping him become dangerous. He promised to mow him down if he remained in his way. Swerve ended on Jon Moxley, taking shots at his rambling promos and suggesting he was desperate. Swerve said the only way to catch a maniac is to send a maniac, and he promised to win the title at Dynasty. As he finished, Mox ran out of the crowd with a crowbar, took out Swerve's knee, then he hit the stomp. The whole time he was doing it, he did that weird lumbering walk where his arms are just out wide and he sticks out his chest like he's a gorilla for no reason whatsoever. Mox then cut a promo in the parking lot saying Cope was a dead man on Dynamite and he hates what they've all turned him into. You know what I hate? What Moxley has become. Forget the kayfabe of it all. I described the way he lumbered around because it looked completely ridiculous. The visual of him taking out Swerve the way he did, let's just say that was less than ideal. Swerve's promo was solid, but there was not a singular memorable line or significant takeaway. It felt like the segment happened just to happen, if that makes sense. Kind of disappointing, all things considered, but not that odd for the B show to have a segment like this. On Dynamite, the AEW Championship was on the line. Jon Moxley defending against Copeland in a street fight. Mox was attacked by Copeland in the parking lot with the bell ringing without them anywhere near the ring. In fact, they were literally inside a truck. Mox used a pool cue. He bit Cope's nose before hitting Paradigm Shift onto the announce table. Then he put a chair around his neck, only to take 10 minutes on the top rope. That allowed Cope to throw the chair at him. Copeland then grabbed Spike, only to eat a cutter. Mox set up a table and just allowed Copeland to grab his weapon and hit him with a shot in the stomach. Then he did another to the back. And then Copeland suplexed Moxley onto Spike, which is that 2x4 with all the nails at the end. Neither of the first 2 made any impact. The third literally stuck in Mox's back, even when he stood up, to the point that the referee and Wheeler Yuta, who had run down to the ring, tried to remove it, but couldn't because it was tugging the skin at his back. It was absolutely disgusting. Yuta before he did that, hit a Bazaiku knee on Copeland. It was probably the single best hardcore spot AEW has done in the last 2 years because it was not overly contrived. It looked and felt real because it was real, and it didn't include a blade job. The blood from this was legitimate, and it looked legitimate, and it was not overdone. So the gruesomeness played. Spike was filed down. Let's be clear about this. It was not regular nails pointing up. That made it even more gnarly that it still got stuck in him. Copeland powerbombed Yuta into a table ringside with Claudio Castagnoli and Pac returning to murk Copeland unabated. FTR remembered that they're friends and saved Dax Harwood pile drove Mox before Copeland speared him through a propped-up table. Marina Shafir broke that fall. Willow Nightingale remembered that her duty was also to get involved in all this. She laid out Marina. Excalibur, he almost cried on commentary saying, God, I love AEW wrestling.
Now go home and smoke some more crack.
Copeland speared Kip Sabian before Nick Wayne caught him with Wayne's World for a false finish. Then Mox put on the Bulldog choke, and I promise you, I counted in Mississippi's. The referee decided Copeland was knocked out in 6 seconds. From the moment it was initially locked in, zero drama whatsoever to the finish. And this was exactly like every Death Riders match or segment that has come before it. My take is the same every single time one of these happens. Sometimes they're good. Sometimes they're great. Sometimes they're excellent matches or segments. And then they all ultimately end with a thud. Not because Mox retains or the Death Riders stand tall, but because of the way it gets booked. And that's what happened here. This was bordering on being an excellent street fight, living up to the name. Stiff strikes, weapon shots, the spike sequence. You can already tell how much I love that based on the way I described it. Okay, the Death Riders and the faces all run in. That was to be expected. I can stomach that. We predicted all of that last week. But you finish this match with Nick Wayne's finisher. Not Christian Cage running in with a spear. Nick Wayne's little cutter off the ropes. And then a choke that was barely locked in when the match was called. And you just throw all the quality wrestling and booking and moments out the window. It's like they can't help themselves. I was on my way to maybe an A for this. I'm down to 3.75 stars B+, just because I enjoyed 80 to 85% of it so much. Way better, by the way, than we got at Revolution. But man, that finish?
Are you fucking kidding me?
FTR and Willow surrounded Copeland after the bell, trying to pity him and lift him up, but Dax refused to offer a hand, so he shoved Cash Wheeler. He walked out on his own. This probably attaches to something that happened on Collision. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. We'll circle back to it. AEW lingered on Copeland standing in the ring. He got cheered. They stayed on that shot for longer than when people win titles in the promotion. That just made me laugh. On Dynamite, MJF, in what I can only presume was a tape promo from last week, put himself over for beating Darby Allin and Will Ospreay and Swerve Strickland in life while fiddling with MVP's card. He was sitting down. He said chips should be placed on him to be the next AEW champion. MJF said he might need Hurt Syndicate to counter Death Riders, but last time he took on partners, he got burned badly, so he'll answer next week. Pretty good promo from MJF. The audio on this was terrible. On Dynamite, Ospreay beat AR Fox in 8 minutes. Fox hit Low Main Pain. I love that move name and the move. But he missed a 450. Ospreay rebounded with Hidden Blade, got the win. Will dapped him up after the bell. As always with Fox, he's an indie legend. He deserves respect. But he's always just thrown onto Dynamite without any semblance of a story or feud, just to put on a good match. To AEW's credit, this match, a Will Ospreay match, was the worst match on the show. And it wasn't bad. I'm not saying it was bad. It just was like the bottom match on the entire card. On Dynamite, Hangman Page backstage reiterated he would never let Swerve hold the AEW championship, and he said he's a man of his word. However, now that he's beaten MJF, he's going to focus on himself and enter the Owen Hart Cup so he can become the next champion. So which is it? If Swerve is close to beating Mox at Dynasty, is Hangman not going to interfere? Is he therefore not a man of his word? Is he only a man of his word when it's convenient for him? That's not exactly how that works. I know it's kayfabe, but he was talking out of both sides of his mouth in this promo. Also, his hair has been pretty weird the last 2 weeks. And what happened to when he was seeking out Swerve backstage a few weeks ago? Is that just not something that matters anymore? I'm just confused. On Collision, Ricochet beat Katsuyori Shibata in an international eliminator match. It went about 13 minutes. They did the Shibata spot where they sit cross-legged and chop one another, except Ricochet's chops had no effect, and Shibata just grabbed him by his bald head and later slapped him on it, treating him like a child. Ricochet won with his feet on the middle rope. Obviously, I watch Collision weekly, but this match had me excited tuning in, and I was immensely disappointed by it. On Collision, Mark Davis beat Mark Briscoe in another International Eliminator match. This went 12 minutes. Surprising result, obviously. Murder Machines again try to corrupt Davis by having him beat up jobbers backstage. Murder Machines distracted, shoving Briscoe off the top rope. That allowed Davis to hit a pile driver. At least the side with the numbers advantage actually won. And this also continued the storyline of Don Callis' family actually supporting Davis, so that's a positive as well. Not that long ago, he would have played a role in the Ospreay feud and then just completely disappeared. On Collision, Powerhouse Hobbs squashed Griff Garrison in 80 seconds. I forgot he existed. Jack Jameson and Preston Vance, who I guess are together with Garrison in something called the Frat House, they threatened him, so the Outrunner is saved. My questions: why did Hobbs need their help? Why is it that he's doing this upon returning? Tony Schiavone crowed about him winning 6 straight matches. His only singles win in that time was Big Bill. Talk about a wasted return. On Collision, Murder Machines beat 4 jobbers in 30 seconds and continued attacking after the bell. Briscoe tried to save with a chair. He failed, so Hobbs came down. Why are these guys still doing squashes? What exactly was the benefit of this? Where were the Outrunners? It was a positive that 4 straight segments all threaded together, but they were so uninteresting, so who cares, right? On Dynamite, Ricochet, Davis, Orange Cassidy, and Speedball Mike Bailey fought in that international 4-way to determine the number 1 contender. Ricochet hopped on commentary to avoid taking punishment. The line that stood out to me: you gotta know when to pick your choices. That was Ricochet. Bailey hit a shooting star press after taking 5 minutes to find his balance. Ricochet followed with the same for a false finish kick out by Cassidy. Then he did a great spike sell on an orange tornado DDT. Davis one-arm powerbomb Bailey while choking Ricochet before powerbombing him. Then he hit his pickup pile driver on Orange, which was a great sequence. Speedball came back with a standing moonsault knee drop before backsliding Davis in the corner. Ricochet simultaneously covered. He got his feet on the rope, and they got a double pinfall on Davis, leading to a triple threat match at Dynasty. Outside of the fact that the referee was immensely out of position, this was a great finish. Real inventive setup to get a triple threat. It's fair to point out that this was a mini tournament that didn't determine a singular winner. And it's also fair to note that Dynasty is still 2 weeks away. So AEW easily could have just done Speedball Ricochet next week to determine the legitimate number 1 contender. But the match between these two and Kenny Omega is going to be immense. So when you get a booking like that, it's pretty easy to, ignore the lack of kayfabe logic when it came to the finish. And of course, when it came to why they didn't just fight each other to actually determine the number 1 contender. But really, they should have just done this exact same booking next week instead of this week. The wrestling was great, completely delivered as an opener. And even though I thought Davis was a strange ad, he played his role well. They should factor this double pinfall into his booking with the Callis family. At least I would do that. 4 stars, A-. On Collision, Toni Storm did more innuendo, saying she wants to see Megan Bayne and what she is capable of doing to her face as opposed to blindsiding her. On Collision, Bayne beat Thunder Rosa in 9 minutes. Rosa cut a pre-match promo saying Bayne came into AEW disrespecting everyone who had been there, including Storm, and she wouldn't stand for it. Thunder said her ovaries were bigger than Megan's brain cells. And I thought about that for a minute. Aren't they naturally? Aren't every woman's ovaries bigger than brain cells, which are very tiny? Bayne attacked Rosa, booted her right in the stomach. Given the pre-match attack, I actually thought this would be shorter. It was mediocre at best. Bayne hit an F5 on the stage. Probably should have won via countout, but instead hit another F5 in the ring. Storm entered to prevent a post-match attack, as per usual. She slugged Bayne in the face. They exchanged haymakers, and then Bayne hit Fate's Descent, which is the name of her F5, with relative ease to stand tall. She definitely looked strong coming out of this, so that succeeded, no question. On Dynamite, Bayne beat Statlander in the main event. Credit to AEW for actually putting the women in the main event where this match deserved to be, by the way. And you may ask, why did this particular match deserve to be there?
Oh, we got 2 big meaty men bumping me tonight.
We sure as hell did. Penelope Ford interfered and got ejected, so Storm called her sugar tits. Stat did a great lariat avoidance, following it with a kip up, catch powerbomb, Falcon Arrow for a near fall. Then she did an insane backwards jump into nothing. They each no-sold 2 German suplexes, took me out of it a little bit. Bayne came back with a regular Falcon Arrow, then threw Stat into Storm before hitting Fate's Descent ringside. Bayne then taunted Storm and hit Fate's Descent back inside to get the win. Storm took time to half tape her hand. She met Bayne in the ring for a really strange exchange of fists. She called Bayne a big bitch and made more puns and innuendos before making the match for Dynasty. Crazy to see Stat beaten twice like this now by Bayne, but If you're trying to put over a hoss as a legitimate number one contender for your top star in Storm, then that's how you need to book her. It's probably the best the debuting women's wrestler has actually been booked in AEW, just from a strength standpoint. The match got fantastic reactions from the crowd. The fans were all in for Storm closing the night. A really nice piece of business all the way around. And it obviously did not hurt that we got
Big meaty man slapping meat. That's what I want.
That's what I wanted to see. 4 stars, A-. On Dynamite, TBS Championship on the line, Mercedes Moné beat Billy Starks to retain the title. There was a 20-second package for Billy immediately before the bell after zero effort was made to make people care about her leading into the show. And I'll remind you, she got this title match despite never having won in AEW. Starks hit like a tucking electric chair bomb off her shoulders for a rope break with Mercedes barely getting her foot on the rope. Starks then missed a senton on the ring apron with Moné moving her into the ring and locking in Statement Maker for the win. High quality finish, a couple great spots to end the match. This was second on the card, so it was an awesome 1-2 start Wednesday night. 3.75 stars, B+. Later backstage, Moné put over Starks for having a lot of heart. She wondered who trained and mentored her, saying that person knows nothing about wrestling. This was obviously a tease for Mercedes and Athena, which will be a hell of a match when it happens. I presume it y'all in, given Athena is from Garland, and they actually need to build Athena as an AEW performer because she's been stuck on Ring of Honor this entire time. So I truly hope AEW doesn't just like shove her on the show a couple weeks before whatever event they wind up fighting at and just saying, this is the match and everyone should know who she is. I mean, the fans will pop because AEW fans either all watch Ring of Honor or they at least all know who Athena is. But if you're a casual watching at home and you see this woman show up, right, you kind of want to know more information. So I'm not criticizing before it happens. I'm just saying, hopefully they actually reintroduce her and establish her on TV before she immediately goes after the TBS title. On Collision, FTR beat Undisputed Not Kingdom in 17 minutes. This was the main event and the best match on the show by a mile, even if it started extremely rough, like surprisingly rough, just given the quality of both teams. Adam Cole and Daniel Garcia, they didn't really add much on commentary, but Garcia made sure we all knew that AEW was where the best wrestle. I'd play the sound drop, but I already did. FTR hit Shatter Machine for a broken fall. Wheeler murked Kyle O'Reilly with a tope suicida. FTR then landed Power and Glory, but O'Reilly came in with a flying flying knee drop. In a really nice sequence, FTR shoved O'Reilly out of the ring, hit a second Shatter Machine on Roderick Strong to end it. This was borderline for me. I'm at 3.75 stars, B+, just because of the way it started, and it never really felt like it hit a crescendo. Still extremely strong. Cole and Garcia shook hands after. You gotta assume that title is changing when they rematch. FTR decided not to shake hands of the other undisputed guys. They said it's 1-1, so it looks like we're gonna get a rubber match there. But that is now 3 occasions in which Dax has not shaken hands, 2 in which Cash hasn't shaken hands. On Collision, Hologram and Top Flight beat Shane Taylor Promotions in 9 minutes. Weak match despite Hologram hitting some exciting individual moves as usual. The crew watched while seated on the ramp, which was in front of the hard cam and pointing at the ring. They added those stupid like plush spikes to their suit jackets. I'm pretty sure they haven't wrestled or spoken again since debuting their team in that like one promo. Low card stuff, so nothing to get worked up about, but pretty damn boring. After commercial, a voiceover from someone, I'm not even sure who, but an American, called Hologram and Commander the Lucha Stars, saying they wanted to fight LFI. Can these guys really not speak for themselves? Like, just have them speak Spanish. What are we doing here? On Dynamite, Bandito backstage cut a promo angry that Chris Jericho humiliated Gravity in front of their mother, saying he would never forgive him. He demanded Jericho return the mask at Collision. Johnny TV cut an immensely confusing promo back at him, challenging for that show. No reason whatsoever, just to like make a match. I wonder who's going to win that one. So that wraps up AEW this week. As you could hear, based on my breakdown, and as I said at the beginning, Dynamite, excellent. Totally worth the 2 hours. Collision, not, almost completely a waste of the 2 hours. I probably could have watched 20 minutes of Collision and had it be valuable. The other hour 40, it just wasn't anything. And that's, for me, frustrating as someone who watches all of these shows every week. In terms of the weekly ratings, we're going to do this super fast. NXT did 676,000 viewers and a 0.15 demo. That's its lowest rating of the entire year. Circumstantially, of course, it was up against the first 4 NCAA tournament, particularly a North Carolina basketball game, which does make sense. So it was low. You know, it was down about 60,000 from the week prior, but nothing to actually worry about. AEW this week did 658,000 viewers and a 0.19 demo, both their best viewership and their best demo. I'm actually scrolling back to see if I have a comparison spot since mid-January. So best numbers in 2 months, really good for Dynamite. Also win against the first four, but a much less attractive game. It was Xavier and Texas on Wednesday night. So, decent competition for both, decent ratings for both. AEW, still hasn't hit that 700,000 mark on TV since September 25th. And NXT has been down the last couple of weeks altogether when you consider they were hitting like 800,000 as recently as February 25th and February 11th, twice in that month. They haven't necessarily come close to that, even though Roadblock was a great show, critically. It didn't do as great of a rating as I thought that it might. So, pretty ho-hum stuff for NXT and AEW in the ratings category this week. And that's about it. Allow me to remind you, we will be back on Tuesday for our next WWE show. This past week, we published it at 8 a.m. Eastern, many hours earlier than we normally get the show out. That was because Raw aired in the afternoon here on the East Coast of the United States. We were able to tape it Monday night, get it out for you at 8 a.m. Whether we're going to do that again, I don't know. Raw is going to air an hour later. In the United States, it completely depends on my work schedule, Vintage Chris Vanini's work schedule. If we can get the show out, we will again publish it at 8 a.m. Eastern. And if not, then we'll just do it in the afternoon when it usually comes out. But stay tuned to our social media at Getting Overcast on Twitter, at Getting Over on Blue Sky, and we will let you know when the episode is going to drop. You'll also get analysis, highlights, a lot more on social media. You can send in questions and comments for the show. Hit us up at those two accounts. And don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Full audio episodes, video clips from old interviews, and full video interviews starting in 2025. Again, at Getting Overcast on YouTube. Please remember,
It's all about Defy.
so head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. And please remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
hope you do as well. $5 a month, $50 for the entire year. You can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You'll get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major show, and exclusive news posts every week. Again, that is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. That is it for today. We'll be back on Tuesday talking WWE. Next Thursday, same bat time, same bat channel, talking NXT and AEW. This is the Silver King signing off and leaving you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.